What if I told you that right now, as you watch this video, a new chapter of the Ukraine war is being written? Not in Kyiv, not in Brussels, but behind closed doors between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Sounds unreal, doesn't it? But that's exactly what's happening. For months, Trump has promised to end the war in 24 hours, a claim most dismissed as political theater. Yet now, whispers are turning into meetings, and meetings are turning into negotiations, all without Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, at the table. This isn't just diplomacy, it's a geopolitical earthquake. Because if this deal goes through, it won't just redraw borders, it could redefine power in Europe for the next generation. But before we dive into the deal itself, let's rewind. How did we get here? For 2.5 years, the war in Ukraine has drained treasuries, shattered cities, and pushed millions from their homes. Western nations rallied behind Ukraine, sending aid and weapons. But over time, something changed. The headlines grew colder, the promises thinner, and public patience began to fade. And in that silence, Trump saw an opportunity, a chance to do what others couldn't or wouldn't. Now here's the twist. This isn't a traditional peace talk. According to reports, Trump isn't working through NATO or the EU. He's going directly to Moscow, skipping the allies who once backed Washington's every move. It's like trying to end a chess game by shaking hands with your opponent while your teammates are still playing. Risky? Absolutely. But that's Trump's trademark. He doesn't play by the book, he writes his own. Still, what's Putin's endgame here? That's the question every intelligence desk in Europe is asking right now. Putin doesn't give something for nothing. If he's talking, he's traded, and what he wants most is legitimacy. A handshake with Trump could mean recognition of Russia's new borders, lifting of sanctions, or even freezing Ukraine's NATO dream. And here's where the story turns darker. Ukraine isn't even invited. Zelensky, once hailed as a global hero, has fallen out with Trump completely. Their relationship collapsed after political clashes, leaks, and mutual distrust. Imagine being the leader of a country fighting for survival and realizing the two men deciding your fate are no longer on your side. That's not just betrayal, that's isolation at the highest level. But the deeper you look, the more it feels like this deal is about something far bigger than Ukraine. It's about America's place in the world. Is this the beginning of a new era? One where Washington retreats from the global stage, leaving nations to fend for themselves? Or is this Trump's gamble to rewrite history, to pull off the peace that Biden, NATO, and the EU couldn't? If he succeeds, it'll change how wars are ended forever. But if he fails, the fallout could be catastrophic, not just for Ukraine, but for Europe and maybe even for the United States. And here's the part nobody's talking about. What happens if the Ukrainian front collapses before the deal is done? What happens when soldiers, already exhausted and undersupplied, realize the political support they've fought for is vanishing overnight? You can almost feel the tension in the trenches, the sense of being traded like pawns in someone else's political game.
So let's pick up where we left off. Trump's deal with Putin, the one that promises to end the war in 24 hours, sounds like the headline the world has been waiting for. Peace, finally. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Peace always comes with a price. And in this case, the question isn't if there's a cost, it's who's going to pay it. Reports suggest Trump's team has floated ideas like a ceasefire along the current front lines, effectively freezing the war where it stands. That would mean Ukraine loses nearly 20% of its territory, including critical industrial regions and ports. In other words, a deal that would end the war on paper, but carve Ukraine's heart out in reality. Putin gets to keep what he's taken, Trump gets to claim victory, and Europe gets to hold its breath, wondering what comes next. Sounds like a bargain only for those not living in the blast zone. And here's the haunting part. Once borders shift under pressure, history shows they rarely stay still. Would this peace last? Or would it simply give Russia time to rebuild, rearm, and return stronger? Because when a superpower smells weakness, peace becomes just a pause between wars. Now, imagine how this plays back home in America. Trump would call it a win, a move to bring soldiers and spending back home. But geopolitics doesn't work like a campaign slogan. Pulling out of global commitments has consequences, especially when it signals to the world that America's guarantees aren't permanent. Allies start to wonder, if Ukraine can be traded for peace, who's next? Taiwan? The Baltics? The credibility of US power isn't just measured in dollars or weapons. It's measured in trust. And once trust breaks, rebuilding it takes generations. But here's where it gets even more complex. Some analysts say Trump's strategy isn't just about peace, it's about repositioning. By negotiating directly with Putin, he's testing a new model of diplomacy, one that sidelines traditional allies and replaces them with personal leverage. Think of it as CEO-style geopolitics. High risk, high reward, high chaos. Still, behind every bold move lies an unspoken question. Is this leadership or desperation? Is Trump trying to outmaneuver Biden on foreign policy, or is this a genuine attempt to end a humanitarian disaster? Maybe both, maybe neither. But one thing is certain. The outcome of these talks will define not just Ukraine's fate, but the shape of the post-war world. And if you think this only affects distant countries, think again. Energy prices, global markets, NATO defense budgets, even the way tech companies handle sanctions, all of it is tied to how and when this war ends. In an age where one drone strike can shake the global economy, no war stays over there. So where does that leave us? Somewhere between hope and fear. The hope that peace might finally come, and the fear that it might come at too high a cost. Trump's move could either end one of the bloodiest wars of the century or light the fuse for something even larger. It's a delicate balance between diplomacy and danger, and right now the world is watching a tightrope act over a pit of fire. But here's the truth you won't hear in most headlines. Peace isn't a headline, it's a process. It's built, not declared. And unless every side has a seat at the table, the peace we celebrate today could become the conflict we regret tomorrow. So ask yourself, is this the dawn of stability or the calm before the next storm? And if you've stayed with me this far, you're already part of the small group who actually wants to understand what's shaping our future, not just scroll past it. That curiosity, that hunger for truth, is what keeps real journalism alive. Watch our next video, The Silent War, How Drones, Sanctions, and AI are Redefining Modern Power. Because while the world debates over peace treaties, the next battlefield is already being built. And it's digital.